Welcome to the Hangar Z podcast, brought to you by Vertical Helicasts and in partnership with Vertical Valor magazine. In this two-part leadership series, Jack Schonely and I sat down with Clint Pulver, who's an Emmy Award winner, author, keynote speaker, pro drummer, and helicopter pilot, as well as a partner in the helicopter apparel company, Heli Life. During our conversation with Clint Pulver, we explore the vital role of effective leadership in the realms of public safety and aviation. Clint shares his inspiring journey from aspiring helicopter pilot to professional speaker and author, shedding light on the urgent need for transformative leadership training and its profound effect on organizational culture and employee retention. Drawing from his insightful Undercover Millennial research, highlighted in the book he wrote titled I Love It Here, Clint reveals a truth we all know too well, that employees often leave their bosses, not their jobs. During the conversation, we discussed the importance of mentorship over mere management and the power of genuine connection in leadership. Throughout this enlightening conversation, Clint tackles the common disconnect in leadership and the significance of time influence in fostering meaningful relationships. With a focus on positivity, recognition, and personal connection, Clint advocates for a leadership approach that enriches employees' lives and cultivates a culture of mentorship and engagement. We mentioned that Clint's a partner at Heli Life, which is the apparel brand designed for helicopter pilots, operators, maintenance crews, aviation enthusiasts, and everything in between. Heli Life is pilot-owned and operated with a design team that's worked incredibly hard to engineer and create the perfect gear and apparel that enhances the flying experience and love of aviation, while also providing comfort, style, and durability that lasts. All Hangar Z listeners can visit helilife.shop today and use the promo code HANGARZ, all one word, to receive 15% off their first order. Thank you to our sponsors, Metro Aviation, Precision Aviation Group, and Robinson Helicopters.
Welcome to the Hangar Z podcast, brought to you by Vertical Helicasts. The Hangar Z podcast is the first and only podcast dedicated to promoting and exploring the personnel and equipment behind the missions in public safety aviation. Join your host, John Gray, Jeff Ratkovich, and Jack Schonely.
Still southbound, skidding to a stop. Stand by here. Looks like they're getting ready to bail. Heads up, guys, bailing. Okay, the guy, he's running through the house, jumping the fence, threw the shotgun, threw something out. Grabbing the shotgun. Don't go over that fence. Don't go over that fence. Grab the shotgun again. He is armed. Stay there. Hold your position.
4 on the stop. You're in custody.
They're advising code 4 on the stop.
Hey, welcome to the Hangar Z podcast. I'm your host, John Gray, and I'm beyond excited for today's conversation. You know, the podcast, we talk a lot about leadership and the problems that exist in public safety and public safety aviation when it comes to leadership development. So we've talked about, you know, how do we try and solve this problem, or at least help with the problem? And Jack and I decided to bring on folks like our guest, Clint Pulver, to share some insight and expertise that they have when it comes to leadership and some of the things that they've seen. You know, being a leader in public safety and public safety aviation doesn't mean you've got stripes on your sleeves. The person on the line level, the entry level police officer, has leadership under their belt. You're leading folks, even though you don't have that title. So I just really want to encourage everyone that's listening, even if you don't have stripes on your sleeves, to start the process of learning to be a better leader. So I think if you're thinking about that now, chances are, as your career progresses, you're going to find yourself in some leadership roles. And you know, the things that we're going to talk about today that Clint has written about in his book really resonate with me, and I think they'll really help the industry with leadership philosophies and learning how to be a good leader. It's funny, I think back to my time as a police officer in patrol. A lot of times the leaders who you thought would make great leaders before they get promoted, and all of a sudden they're a different person. Like, what happened? You know, well, that person probably didn't get any leadership training and had really no one really helped them get there. So our goal through these conversations, especially with Clint today, is to talk about the importance of leadership and the cultivation of leadership philosophies. So a little bit about Clint. He wrote an amazing book, and I've got it right here. It's called I Love It Here. And I had a chance to read it before our conversation today, and it's one of the books you just can't put down. You know, there's not very many books that I open up and I'm like, I can't wait to get to the next page. A lot of times I pick it up and I'm like, when's the chapter in so I can take a break? That wasn't the case in this book. And like I said, a lot of your philosophies, Clint, really resonated with me as far as your mindset and what you've done. So before we continue, I do want to thank Wes from Metro Aviation for connecting the two of us I really appreciate that, Wes. And Metro, you guys do an amazing job. It's funny how small of a world the law enforcement and in particular aviation community is. As Clint and I and Jack have talked for a little bit offline, we've already come across a couple different names that we have in common and places that we've been in common. Clint's not only an author, but he's a helicopter pilot. And so you're more than welcome here. And we're very thankful to have you. Thanks for joining us.
It's an honor. It's an honor. Thank you for your time, your preparation. And also, again, thank you to Wes and Metro Aviation for lining this up. It's a pleasure to serve this community and be a part of the tribe that I love and naturally just have a passion towards. So happy to be here.
With us to join in the conversation with Clint is the commander, Jack Schonely. How you doing, sir?
Hey, John. You keep promoting me every show. Commander. I was the lowest rank you could get when I retired. Anyway, but it goes back to what you were saying about leader's not a rank, and it isn't. So we'll get into that. But this is exciting to have Clint. I think this is the first guest we've had where I've actually witnessed through video a solo in a helicopter. I watched your solo, Clint. Fine job. Excellent job. Nice set down at the end. Calm as can be. There was a lot of pressure on you.
Oh, yeah.
Cameras and the wife. And I mean, a lot of pressure.
It was a lot of pressure. But we made it through, and I'm still today. So
that's great.
Well, again, Clint, thanks for joining us. If you could just start by telling us a little bit about yourself. And of course, we all really want to know how you got into aviation. So let's dig into that a little bit.
I've traveled all over the world, mainly as a professional speaker. But before all of that, really, it was rooted in research. And for the last 7 years, I have spent the majority of my life as the Undercover Millennial. It's kind of like Undercover Boss without the makeup. And I would go undercover into organizations as someone who was looking for a job. And so we called it the Undercover Millennial program because I'm a millennial. That's a generation I was born in. And I was young enough to where I could go in, I'd put on a hat, a hoodie like I'm wearing right now. And I'd walk into, the department headquarters. I'd walk into the Chick-fil-A, the Walmart, the store, the franchise, the medical center, whatever it was, as someone who was looking for employment. And I would just walk up to the person and casually say, hey, I'm just thinking about applying. What's it like to work here? And the employees, they always get quiet. They kind of start looking around if there's like an illegal drug exchange. And then they tell me everything. They would tell me everything. They would tell me the good, the bad, what they loved, who they didn't love. And we'll get into this more in the episode. But that's the majority of what my time was spent doing, is that research and the magic behind how great leaders were creating organizations that people never wanted to leave. The magic was found when I would go in undercover and I'd say, what's it like to work here? And an employee would respond with, I love it here. I love this culture. I love what we're doing. My unit, it's a family. I'll never leave. Why? And really leaders and what those leaders were doing to create that kind of buy-in. So, but before any of this happened, the first and still to this day, one of my biggest loves was aviation, specifically helicopters. I've been a professional drummer too. We'll talk a little bit about that as well. But before any of that, just the magic of flight, and specifically the magic carpet ride of helicopter flight, just enthralled everything in my heart. I wanted to fly for, at the time, University of Utah AirMed. I wanted to be, an EMS helicopter pilot. I thought there would be just nothing cooler than flying up to a mountain, saving somebody, having a purpose, but also being able to fly. And I graduated from high school as a senior with my pilot's license. I did fixed wing first, and then I went and did a 2-year study abroad mission for my church. I came home, and at this point in the story, I'm 21 years young. And at 21, you have to renew your driver's license. So I'll never forget. I went into the DMV, went to renew my driver's license. I put my head in the little black box to test my vision. And all I could see were just 6 little black dots. And she's like, well, read the letters. And I said, ma'am, all I see are little, I don't think it's working. She said, kid, you're not pushing hard enough. I said, ma'am, I'm pushing. And finally, she comes from around the corner, pushes me out of the way, puts her head in the black box and she reads out loud CKGELFWZ. And she's like, honey, like, can you read? I'm like, ma'am, yes, I can read.
Yeah.
She said, then listen, young man, I think you're blind. Like there's something that's not registering. And I looked at her and I said, listen, lady, I drove here today. And she said, well, you're not driving back. And she took a big red stamp. She pushed it on my paperwork. It said denied. Now I'm under house arrest at the DMV. And long story short, my mom picked me up and we ended up at the Moran Eye Center at the University of Utah with one of the top leading authorities in a rare and degenerative eye disease known as keratoconus. And for me, as a 21-year-old kid, my eyes with this eye disease, they were as bad. My eyes were as unhealthy as an 87-year-old's. The cornea was thinning and thinning year after year to the point where eventually I'm going to go blind. I could have corneal transplants. The failure rate during that time on the corneal transplants was super high. And I remember thinking like this is, there's no way. And the doctor asked me, he goes, what do you want to do when you grow up? And I said, I want to fly helicopters and I want to help people. And he goes, listen, the helicopter side's never going to happen for you. He said, everything that I'm about to just write in your chart and your medical history with the current conditions of your eyes will see to it that you never fly. It just isn't going to happen for you. And that was a really hard moment for me because, you know, I just, there you are as a young person, right? You have your eye on the sky and then in a moment that sky falls in all around you. And I went from having passion and purpose and direction to literally having no clue what I was going to do with the rest of my life. And then with the diagnosis that by the age of 31, 32, I was going to go completely blind and lose my sight. And I do believe this though, John and Jack. I believe that sometimes in life, good things fall apart so that better things can fit together. I know that might sound like trite or you know, some hokey motivational quote, but I believe that. And some things fell apart in my life so that some better things fit together. And I ended up going to college. I worked in the medical field for 5.5 years in the operating room as an orthopedic specialist. You know, I had a great career. Learned so much working within that world, but just never really totally felt fulfilled. I just still wanted to fly. I had been a professional drummer, had toured and recorded all over the world playing drums before I went to college, but I still just wanted to fly. And I knew I didn't want to be a touring musician because I wanted to have a family. I didn't want to be on the road. And I remember sitting down with two of my dear friends and I said, wouldn't it be crazy if you could find a job, a career that allowed you to do three things? And I called them the 3 Ps: passion, purpose, and the ability to provide. Those 3 things. And my 2 friends, they're both college grads. They said, I don't know if that's like possible. Like, look at a school teacher, you know, they're full of passion and purpose, but every summer they're looking for a new place to work or how to make ends meet to make extra money. Or look at a doctor, you know, making good money, but then the stress and the frustration, time away from family. Like, I don't know if you can find a career that allows you to do all 3. And in college, there was a quote that was shared with me that I think is really important to mention. The quote is by Oscar Wilde. He was an Irish playwright, an amazing writer, thought leader. And he said this quote: "To live is the rarest thing in the world. For most people merely exist." Like, to really live. And for me, I was just existing. I felt like every day it was kind of just rinse and repeat. I was like living for Friday. I just was in the motions, not totally into what I was doing. And when he said that, what you're asking for is so rare, it triggered that quote: "To live is the rarest thing in the world." And 2 weeks after that, I quit my job and I jumped into the world of professional speaking, training youth. I started speaking to kids and I went to high schools and I did these performances on the drum set and I shared a message of kindness. And then that resonated with teachers and paraprofessionals and educators. And then I started the Undercover Millennial research project that then led into corporate training and working with departments of public safety, working with corporations from NASA to McDonald's to Hewlett Packard to everything in between. And I have been doing that now for 7.5 years. And I can tell both of you this. The day I quit my job was the day I truly started living on passion, on purpose, in the pursuit of really, my mantra is it's not about being the best in the world. It's about being the best for the world. And so full circle moment, circling back to, this is a long answer, I promise, but it has the foundation of what we're going to be talking about. A year and a half, almost 2 years ago, I went in for a routine eye exam. And this is after a new procedure came out called cross-linking. And I was one of the first human trials that had this procedure done. And it was for people with my eye disease. At this point, I was barely legal enough to drive. My eyesight just deteriorated year after year after year. And I was one of the first human trials. And they did the procedure on my right eye. And then 6 months later, they did it on my left eye. And it completely stopped the progression of the disease. But my eyes weren't good enough to where I could see. I could never, the thought of holding a third class, a first class medical, just not going to happen.
Yeah.
And fast forward to a year and a half, almost 2 years ago, I went in for a routine eye exam with a new doctor that I had never met before, specialized with keratoconus patients. And he looks through my medical history, goes, "You're a pilot." And I said, "I used to be." I said, it's been a rough road. He goes, why are you not in scleral lenses?
Thank you to our sponsor, Robinson Helicopter Company, the choice for unrivaled safety and reliability, so you can accomplish any mission with confidence. For more than half a century, Robinson has been at the forefront of the helicopter industry. From the R-22 to the R-66 turbine, Robinson makes helicopters accessible so more people can accomplish more missions. Climb higher. For additional information, visit www.robinsonheli.com.
And I'm like, what do you mean? He goes, scleral lenses. He's like, they're brand new contacts that they just developed. They're amazing. And they are literally transforming the vision and the possibilities of people with your eye disease. And he goes, I have to try this. I have to fit you with these lenses. And I kindly looked at him and I said, listen, I've heard this before, and I've been through dozens of lenses, fit after fit, new technology. And he got serious with me and he goes, "Listen, you don't understand. I have to try this with you. I promise you that where you're at, we will be leaps and bounds ahead of what you can see." And I said, "Oh, okay." And so we went through 6 months of fit and refit, trial after trial. And I'm someone who believes in moments. I love moments. If you look at your life and really what makes it a great story, it's the moments. We don't remember days in our lives. We remember the moments. And this was a moment when he put these lenses in, he put the foggles on, and he goes, "What's better, 1 or 2? I said 2. He goes, "What's better, 2 or 3? And I said 3. And he goes, what's the lowest line that you can read?" And I said, D, E, C, G, E, L, F, Z. And he got a little emotional and he said, "You just hit the 2020 line."
Wow. That's crazy.
And I started crying. I really did, because the first thought in my mind was, I can fly again. I can do this. What was once a lost dream has now become a reality, and a few things fell apart so that some better things could fit together. And 2 weeks after that, I bought a helicopter. I know it sounds crazy, but I did. And this is my childhood dream. There is nothing better. I love it. I eat, sleep, and drink aviation, especially aviation with a purpose. And man, it has been one wild ride and an adventure of a lifetime. And I'm so grateful for where I'm at, and it's opportunities and moments like that have led to opportunities where I get to have conversations with you. So there's a little context.
It's amazing.
Who I am
Yeah,
in my story.
man, there's a ton to unpack there. But
Yeah.
you said something I want to reflect on for a second. And he said, "Are you a pilot?" And you said, "I used to be."
Yeah.
And that's something that resonates with me. And I had 2 neck surgeries, ultimately ended up retiring medically from that second neck surgery. So I understand that, and I identify with that. People ask you, "What do you do?" "I used to be a pilot." And it hurts, to say I don't do that anymore. So I think back to when you said you were 21 years old, and that crushing moment where you thought that dream was gone, but you fought on and did some really cool stuff in between. And here you are. You said your 2 goals were to help people and to fly. And here you are, years later, and those are the 2 things you're doing, which is amazing.
Yeah.
That full circle moment you talked about, getting that moment where you can be told by a doctor, you're good. You're 2020. I can't imagine how good that felt, So that's an amazing story. I remember the part in your book where you're talking about that appointment at the DMV, and I think everybody can picture that interaction at the DMV, how unsympathetic anybody at the DMV is, and what that process is like. I can only imagine how frustrating that was for you. But I want to go back even before that. You started talking about the project you are part of, and the idea of how people quit bosses, not jobs, really kind of comes up. And that's 100% the case in public safety and public safety aviation. A lot of agencies have a really, really great program, flying some of the most advanced helicopters, some of the most advanced mission sets that exist in the world. But the culture that exists within that unit, because of poor leadership, drives people to leave.
100%.
And it's really sad to see that, so how do we get around that? And I'm excited to dig into that with you and what you found through some of your research. But can you just talk about that concept about how people quit bosses, not jobs?
100%. The perception of leadership versus the reality of an employee's experience is usually a night and day difference. The whole Undercover Millennial program was born and really founded within a moment where I wrote about it in the very first part of the book. I was with a business leader. We were on a mastermind group in New York City. He owned a large sporting good retail chain, and he was talking about how they were just crushing business. They were adapting. The times were changing. The market's changing. So therefore, they needed to rise to the occasion, and they've grown over the years. And I said, so what about your employees? Do you feel like you've had to update technology? You've had to update, business tactics and what you do with people the same way you've done that for your business? And he said, nah, not with people. He goes, I treat people the same way I treated them 20 years ago, and we get results. And I was a little taken back by that, because here he felt the need to change how you do business with a market and an industry and a world that's always changing, but not with people. And I looked around, and in his store were all of his employees, and they were all kind of my age or younger. And I thank the gentleman for his time. We had about 30 to 40 minutes to kill until we needed to be to the next destination. So I had nothing else better to do. And just simply out of curiosity, I walked up to the first employee that I saw, and we were in the corner of the store, and I said, "Hey, I just have a quick question. Do you like working here? Like, what's it like?" And the employee, same thing that always happens in all the undercover stuff I've done. He looks around, he goes, "Dude, every one of us are just numbers. Like, we're just cogs in a wheel, dude. Like, I don't even think my manager knows my name. No joke." And he goes, I've already applied to 3 other places, dude. As soon as I get a chance, I'm out. And like, such a difference, right? And then I went and asked another employee and another. And in the time that I had, I interviewed 6 employees. And out of the 6, 5 of this guy's employees said they would not be working for this dude and his store in less than 3.5 months. And the leader thought he was crushing it. The leader thought everything was just and I thought, he has no idea. And I think the reality is that there's not a lot of incentive when things are not going well for an employee to walk up to a boss, to walk up to a colonel, to walk up to somebody and go, hey, just so you know, listen, I feel like this could help you. Every time we win as a team, you take all the credit. Oh, also, the guys wanted me to tell you, every time we lose as a team, you blame everybody else. Yep. Happy Tuesday, Doug. We love you. Like,
Yeah.
they're not going to, they don't say it. Like, there's no incentive for them to do that. So instead, what do? They leave. Or worse, they mentally check out and then they stay. And so again, like, how do we create this alignment to where you're not the manager in the story, you're not the leader even in the story? How do you become the mentor? Out of all, I've now done 11,000 interviews undercover. I'll never do it again. It's one of the hardest things I've ever done in my life. When people hated their jobs, they always described a manager. They always described a leader, someone with a title, usually. But when they loved their job, they always described those individuals as the mentor. Mentorship versus management. Still to this day, generation after generation, 7 years of doing this research, mentorship is still the number one attribute that created a dynamic that people wanted to be a part of. Think about this. Mentorship has to be earned. If you've ever had a mentor in your life, you chose them. You chose them because when you looked at them, you said, I get to live a better story because of them. You cannot become the mentor until the mentee invites you into their heart. How do we become this individual that people choose? An individual that people go, I get to live better because I like myself best because I'm with you. You create a workplace and a dynamic where I don't just survive through work. I actually thrive. You are an advocate, not just someone who's trying to develop me. Mentorship versus management always wins.
That is outstanding.
Yeah.
Simple and outstanding.
Yeah.
You know?
As you go through this, I'm thinking about all the people that I look up to as I would call them mentors, and a lot of what you're describing are the things they possess. Like Terry Mouch, talks about you have to be a good leader, you have to love people, and not in the cheesy way, but in a way that you talk about servitude as a leader. Like you have to serve the folks that you're assisting. I think of our time in Nashville, Jack. And a friend of ours, he's a sergeant at Nashville Metropolitan Police Department. He had a list of 8 things about leadership. And the bookends, number 1 and number 8, were take care of your people. And I think that can't be said more. And the mentor relationship is interesting. I think a lot of people, when you get put into positions of leadership, they think of employee management, like you said. Whereas I think what you should consider is that mentor relationship. How to become a mentor? How do I help these people develop into the employees? How do I help them accomplish their goals? What are their goals? I think a lot of bosses probably have no clue.
Yep.
Jack, for you in your experience, what of what he's saying resonates with you, and what are your thoughts on what he's describing?
Everything Clint said in his book resonated with me for 2 reasons. One, I was in law enforcement for 36 years and had great leaders and pathetic leaders. And my wife was a retail manager for 30 plus years, and she was a good one. I'll tell you a quick, Clint, you'll really appreciate this because you just mentioned about the name. My wife left one company, had an opportunity to go to another. She worked for multiple retailers, Gap, Pier 1, Ulta, many, many different retailers. But she had the opportunity to go to a new furniture place. She got recruited by this owner. And when she left, guess what came with her? Like 6 or 7 of her employees. That's how much they loved her and they trusted her. To make a long story short, it didn't work. The owner of that business was corrupt. He was lying to people and he was telling his employees, just tell them the furniture will be done next week, knowing it would be 6 months, that sort of thing. So Tracy, to his face, said, I don't do that. I have integrity. I'm not doing that. And he said, and my wife's name is Tracy. And then he said, well, Stacy, then you're fired. He called her Stacy as he let her go for integrity. And I thought of that when I was reading your book about that particular person and how he had no idea. But a lot resonated. One thing I want to touch on, repeat the 3 Ps, Clint. Repeat what the 3 Ps are, and then I'm going to share something with you about law enforcement.
Yeah. Passion, purpose, and the ability to provide financially, to provide a sense of income that you can survive.
Yes.
Yeah.
So John and I will tell you, we've been around a lot of law enforcement people. I've been around the world around law enforcement, aviation people. All of them will tell you, they will all tell you that the 3 Ps, they've got it. They've got the best job in law enforcement in the world. I've had Blue Angels in the back seat of my helicopter saying, you got the best flying job in the world, man.
Yep.
And like, oh my gosh, a Blue Angel saying that. My point is that we did have the best job in the world, but the one thing that can destroy it is leadership. And it does. It does. And that's why this conversation with you is so relevant to law enforcement and law enforcement aviation and military and anything else you can name. A leader's a leader. It doesn't matter if they have stars, bars, or just a name tag that says district manager or a store manager. It doesn't matter. A leader's a leader. That John and I both put that down on our outlines about the discussion with the friends, because it hit us, that, hey, that's the problem with law enforcement. It's not the job. The job's incredible. I love my job. I love it here. Everybody says that. But my captain is pathetic. He's unsafe. He has a poor culture. He breeds contempt. Everything that you talked about in your book, how these leaders they either are the reason you stay or the reason you go, is one of your quotes. Boy, is that true.
Yep.
So yes, everything resonated with me, Clint, from your book and from our conversation so far. It carries over very much so.
There's one quote I'll bring up right now, because I think it's important to talk about, and it has to do with recruitment and retention. Recruitment's something that we can't totally control. There's a lot of factors that are prohibiting law enforcement from being an attractive career for people. Public sentiment, politics, the economy, a lot of things out of our control. Retention is something that we can control. That comes down to what we're describing, good leadership. In the quote you just brought up, you say, what will happen if you don't invest your people? They'll leave anyway. There's 2 leaders in our industry in the last 6 months that I know of personally who are absolute leaders in our industry, and they've left or are leaving law enforcement aviation for something else because of the culture that they're operating underneath. That's horrible. The second part of that quote is important as well. Or worse, they'll immensely quit and stay. There's a lot of people that are retired on duty, not necessarily in aviation. A lot of folks that are in aviation are really happy and love what they do. But I think that is, being retired on duty is one of the worst things that could happen to someone in public safety. It's dangerous, So Clint, back to you. Can you elaborate a little bit on that quote and kind of what you've seen through your studies and your research? Thank you to our sponsor, Metro Aviation. Metro Aviation, the world's largest family-owned aeromedical operator, offers comprehensive aircraft services with 160 plus aircraft in over 25 states. The Completion Center installs medical and law enforcement kits and avionics, serving diverse aviation needs including offshore, utility, VIP, and corporate sectors.
I could always tell going in undercover very, very quickly whether a unit, a team, an organization, a culture was just surviving or they were truly thriving, based off of 2 things: standards and connection. Standards and connection. So standards in the public safety thing would be like, I need you to show up on time. There's protocol. There's safety. There are rules of engagement. There are systems in place, core values, things that we can trace, things that we can look at, things that we almost follow. Like it is a hard written rule, standards. Even on a profitability side of a business, right? Are we making more money than we were yesterday? Or is our retention numbers, like tangible things? That's standards. The intangible side of a culture and leadership and a business or a public safety unit, whatever you want to call it, is the connection piece. This is where people feel seen. People feel heard. They feel understood. It's when you as a captain, you realize that people have a life outside of work. And it's your job to get to the part about them. And that they're people, right? Not just employees, not just an officer, not just a title. It's a person. So those two variables are what we will use, because right now I want to share with you the 4 different types of captains that we found in the public safety world. It's 4 types. The first captain that we found was the removed captain. You could even call them the retired but still on duty captain. So they were low on standards. They were also low on connection. This is the person's like, listen, I retire in a year. I'm just making it to Friday. They're kind of here, but they're not really here. Like they're just burnt out. Like the thought of it's exhausting to them. So what does this create in the team? Disengagement. Everybody becomes removed from the captain because the captain's removed from them. There is no buy-in on what the captain's standards are because there really isn't much care for the standards anyways. There's no care for the connection because the captain could care less about who your family is or what you did on Friday. Just do your job. Do your job. The second captain is the buddy captain. This is the captain that was low on standards, high on connection. Like this is the captain. I want everybody to love me. I want everybody to love each other. I don't want to ruffle feathers. Like I don't want to be the guy that's always coming down on people. I just need everybody to just love me because that's how they're going to listen to me and that's how I'm going to get things done. So this is where, the younger or younger leaders become more of the captain than the captain, because the captain would rather be liked more than they're respected.
Mm-hmm.
So what this does is it creates a sense of entitlement where you almost have people saying, oh, come on, captain, like you did it for so-and-so, do it for me. Come on, captain's not going to care. Captain's my friend. We're homies, right? This is, the person that goes and plays Xbox on the weekend with the team members, right? Invites them over to the family for grilling some barbecue. And then Monday they're like, listen, Johnny, you got to do better. And Johnny's like, I just saved you in Call of Duty on Fridays. Now what? Now you're the leader? Yeah, okay. Tell your wife, Barb, I say hi. That's a hard day. The third captain that we found is the controller. Very common in your world. This is the individual that was high on standards, all about standards, command and control, military type leadership. Do your job. I'm not here to be your friend. You want me to love you? No, smile. Smile. We give you a paycheck. Tomorrow's going to be worse. Like, be glad you're here. Easy come, easy go. You don't want to be here? Leave. We'll replace you. Like fear-based manipulation, fear tactics. Sometimes we saw in our research this did get results. However, the results never lasted. They never lasted. And we're in a dynamic where literally right now I could take a stone and I could throw it and I would hit a business that's dying to retain your talent, that would love to recruit your people. And people have options. And so what does that do when you have high standards, low connection? I'm not here to be your friend. Do your job. It creates rebellion. This is where a captain goes head to head with every person on the team instead of going shoulder to shoulder. The beauty of all of this was number 4. And this is what I do not call them the captain. I didn't call them the leader or the manager. Their people called them the mentor. Mentorship was the individual that was high on standards. Like we work in the realms of public safety. Like we have to have high standards. That's important. That's a part of our job. But also I understand that you're a person to be loved. High connection. And it's my job as your leader, as your captain, to get to the part about you. We hear this sometimes and we think, okay, well, do I start with high standards as a captain or do I start with high connection? Which one do you start with in your world? And I would say, based off of my research, what I have seen, what people have said, right? My book was written by at the time, 10,000 employees who knew what good leadership looked and felt like to them. And the point I think that I'm really trying to emphasize is no significant loyalty will ever happen without significant connection. Connection is what you start with first, because everybody is always asking the question, let me know when it gets to the part about me. Let me know in this unit, let me know in this job, let me know in this industry, even though I'm in this to serve, even though I have the coolest job in the world, at the end of the day, if I can't survive, if I can't thrive, I don't care how cool the job is, I'm going to leave because I can't continue to sustain this. Let me know when this can support my family. Let me know when I can come to work, and because of work, I get to go home a better dad. And sometimes we hear that as leaders, and we can think, especially in a servant type of an industry like public safety, sometimes we could think, well, those entitled little shining stars in my life, If I hear one more person say, let me know when it gets to the part about me, I'm going to lose it. But I would say it's not so much about entitlement as it is about just good leadership, bringing humanity back into what we do in the public safety sector. That's what people talk about. That's what people remember. And I think that's an important aspect to consider.
That might be the most valuable 5 minutes on leadership we've had, John. Because as you're talking, Clint, I guarantee you, John will tell you this too. Names are popping into your head.
Oh yeah,
on each of the leaders,
Totally.
And they can be captains, they can be chiefs, they can be sergeants, lieutenants, everything in between.
Yep.
And names are popping into your head. I'll give you one example of the connection thing. I won't mention the chief's name, but we flew him often to go from point A to point B. Hey, I got to get to a meeting here. And when he'd hop in the back, half the time he wouldn't put his headset on. Had no interest in talking to us at all. The other half, he would have the headset on, but not talk. Never said thank you when they got out of that aircraft. So I would tell people about this. And two of us, Chris Owen and I, Chris listens. He knows who I'm talking about. We would say, Daryl Gates, had he been in the back of that helicopter, he would have known how many goals my kid had at hockey this past weekend.
Yeah.
By the end of the conversation. I use that example all the time. That's the connection. That's that connection. And I had respect for that. And I completely disrespected the person who had zero connection.
That's right.
Zero. I mean, and he wasn't a bad man. He wasn't a terrible leader, but he didn't have the connection you're talking about. And that's so important. It's part of the package.
Totally. Yeah. And yeah, it's so sometimes easily overlooked. And I think that's an important thing that you mentioned, John, that sometimes people are just promoted because they did a good job as a patrol officer. So let's just promote them, right? But they never have that love of people. They don't have that, that is what it is. That is what leadership entails, because every day as a leader, you're making either deposits of trust or you're making withdrawals per standards. And the problem occurs is when you try to make a withdrawal to uphold high standards and you've made no deposits of trust. So therefore the bank account is empty. And there is no ability to create collaboration in that. It's just control, manipulation, or what leads to leaving, low disengagement, low retention, and dysfunction within a team and a culture. Mentorship.
In the environment that we're in currently, every agency's hurting for people. Signing bonuses are ginormous. If you're in an environment where, you've got the leadership that's driving you to leave, there's not a whole lot holding you back. That the culture that you're fostering within your unit is so important for so many reasons, not only for the effectiveness and efficiency of what you're doing on the day-to-day basis, but for the retainment of folks that you have within your unit. You talked about the number 2 type of leader. I think of Michael Scott from The Office, who wants to be everybody's buddy. Yeah. But at the end of the day, isn't actually being a leader. He's just appeasing everybody. And I think that's one challenging part of public safety and public safety aviation is sometimes as a leader, you make unpopular decisions, and I think people struggle with that. How can I make unpopular decisions, but also have, a positive amount of trust in my bank account? you know? And I think it comes down to the small interactions that we have on a day-to-day basis. It's not the big things that we do. I think a lot of times it's the small things, the thank you, putting your headset on and treating the aircrew that you're flying with like a normal person. You know, those little things go a long ways. Handwritten thank you notes is as small of a gesture that is, that makes a big difference and goes a long ways. The police chief that I retired under, he would send every police officer a handwritten birthday card every year.
Wow.
And the amount of time it must have taken for him to do that must have been extraordinary. But every time he did that, think about the trust and the buy-in that person had then for that leadership. You know, I think that goes a long ways.
I'll share something really interesting. Out of 11,000 interviews now, never once, not once, when I would go undercover and I would ask somebody, you know, what's it like to work here? And they would respond with, I love it here. Never once did an employee say, you know, I'll never leave because, you know, my job, we're just so good at time management. Like, we just rock it. Like, we run the best meetings. We always start on time. I'll never leave. Like, never. Like,
That's great.
What they talked about were moments when somebody, a leader, usually got to the part about them. A moment where, you know, I'll never forget when, you know, me and my spouse, we had a baby, and the whole team, everybody pitched in and provided 6 months of free diapers. I'll never forget that. Or I'll never forget, you know, we were struggling with going through a divorce in a really difficult time. And my captain came up and said, hey, I want to pay for 5 marriage counseling sessions for you and your spouse. I'll never forget the time when, you know, my dad passed away and meals, flowers, notes showed up, like moments. Like, and even you brought it up, John, like little, like vocal praise. We would, when we would talk about when we'd go in undercover and people would say the things that they loved, vocal praise was number one. It's the number one thing that people talked about. It was also the one thing that people wish they would have had more of. And the crazy thing about vocal praise is it costs your company $0.
Yep.
Like that boys, like that girls, keep it up. Saw what you did. You know, I just appreciate you. What if we can systemize our recognition where every Wednesday, you know, you put a reminder in your phone, dude, hey, take 5 minutes and send a thank you note. 5 minutes, pick up the phone and just call somebody and pour into them. Like, that's the cool part of our job in leadership. It really is. That's the sweet stuff. That's the fun stuff. And I think sometimes we get so bogged down with all of the to-dos that we forget really what people actually remember.
Yeah.
Is that the biggest thing, Clint, the to-dos, why it gets disconnected? I mean, there's probably a lot of things.
Yeah.
I mean, this is common sense, being a good human type of stuff, right? That we're talking about. It's not rocket science. It really isn't. And everybody knows it. Everybody experiences it in a good way and a bad way. And yet, so many leaders in business, military, law enforcement, anything, miss it. Is it the to-do list, or is it arrogance, or is it what causes that disconnect when everybody kind of can relate to it themselves? Do you have a theory on that, or solid evidence to say, well, this is what happens to people when they get in those jobs and they disconnect?
Thank you to our sponsor, Precision Aviation Group. Mission-critical operators and fleet managers rely on Precision Aviation Group as a worldwide leading rotor and fixed-wing MRO provider. PAG provides tip-to-tail solutions in 4 MRO segments: avionics, components, engines, and manufacturing DER services. A single point of contact gives you access to over 150 million in inventory globally, 24/7. Just call 800-537-2778. Precision Aviation Group. Others sell parts. We sell support.
I think it's a variation of many different things, and every leader is unique and different. And I'm always so careful when I talk about this to say it's, you know, this is the silver bullet or this is the one, because people are very diverse. You could have one leader that they're a horrible leader because of X, Y, and Z, and another one thrives because of X, Y, and Z. And what I've tried to do in our research is to look for those trends. Like, what is a common trend? And a lot of it comes from perception. Like, this is how I was led. This is how my dad was. So this is how I'm going to be a dad. This is how my captain was. And so I'm going to be this kind of a captain. And sometimes I've heard the saying, you should be the leader that you wish you had. Like, be the leader you wish. And every time I hear that, I think, no. I think that's a missed opportunity. You should become the mentor you were lucky enough to have. To me, that brings a higher sense of relevancy.
It does.
Like, think about it. Like, name the teacher that made the biggest difference in your life. Name
Barry Adams.
There you go.
I mean,
there you go. Right? Like, name that captain that made the biggest difference. Like, you instantly remember those people, and it's because they remembered you. And what did they do to create that connection? I have found in our research that every great mentor was always being mentored. And the hope, so the question is who are you listening to? Where does that perception come from? Where is this fear-based manipulation? Where is this command and control model? Where is that coming from? Because usually it's rooted in a perception. So that's one. I would also say that so many times leaders are just so busy. They have so much. They're so immersed in the other 100 things that are expected of them, or that they push onto themselves, either intentionally or unintentionally, to the point that we forget the whole reason of what it is to lead. I have found that good leaders, for the most part, they know what they need to do. The significant mentors were always masterful at the things they needed to stop doing. There's something to be said for, like, financial affluence, or even busyness. There's something to be said also, though, for time affluence. How can we in our leadership create more time? And you brought it up, Jack, that, there's a to-do list, right? We're usually really good at the to-do list. Like, we love that shot of dopamine every time we check something off. Like, I'm crushing it. I'm tackling this. I'm moving forward. I'm advancing. But I would recommend, and I have seen great leaders do this, it's the power of a to-don't list. A to-don't list. Standards. High standards of the things that you're going to say no to, so that you can say yes more to people. Because your patrol officers, your chiefs, everybody spells mentorship Time. Granted, we can't spell that well, but that's how we spell it. Time. How do we create more of that? And I think as we strive to do that and be more dedicated in our efforts in doing that, it's amazing how we can connect more, because we're not so weighed down by all the other things that ultimately nobody cares about. Nobody remembers. Yes, it's still important, but remember, it's about people. So we've got to say no to a few things.
Yeah. In the book, you talk about, and I agree with you, how in your life, nobody ever says, I wish I would have had more money. I wish I would have spent more time at work. I think everyone always looks back and says, I wish I would have spent more time with my mom, my dad, my family, my friends, the people that mean something to me. You talk about connections and the importance that plays in life. As a leader and a mentor, I think when you convert that and what it means for you at work, it makes sense. Those small sacrifices of time that you could then lead into your own personnel is huge. I think about how good leaders surround themselves with people who are more knowledgeable and better at things than they are themselves, and acknowledge that. There's a story in your book that you brought up that I want to talk about. You talked about the teachers that were influential. I think as a leader, you should always be looking at the folks you're leading and looking for skills that they possess, and how that could help the organization and help that person ultimately. The story of Mr. Jensen and the drumsticks.
Yep.
This is one story that I really loved in your book. Can you talk about that?
You bet. There's I think in the realms of employee retention, whether we're talking about a captain, a chief, a lieutenant, anybody in the public safety sector, there's two types of people. There are people that will constantly see the problems Like, it doesn't matter what's going on. They'll tell you what's wrong with it. Like, isn't it a beautiful day today, Steve? Yeah, wait till tomorrow. Like,
law enforcement's really good at that, right, Jack?
They're really good.
like, we will show you the problem.
Professionals.
Or there's the chief, the captain, the lieutenant, the person that will strive to see what's right and accentuate that. Yes, there are difficulties. Yes, there are problems, but I don't live there. I choose to see what's right. I choose to see the opportunity. And so I say that because for me as a young child, I always had a hard time sitting still. I still have a hard time sitting still. I would just constantly be moving. My hands would move. I would just tap. I would take a pen, I would take my hand, and I would just tap. My feet would move. And everybody saw this issue. They saw a limitation. They saw a disability. And I remember my teacher, Mr. Jensen, 5th grade teacher. He looked at me as I was tapping in class. And he said, Clint, listen, I need you to stop tapping. I also need to see you after class. Okay, you and me, we're going to have a conversation. And I remember thinking, like, this is it. I'm getting kicked out of school. I had been constantly teased. Kids called me the twitcher. I got called the tapper. Even my parents, it's just a problem. And he sat me down and he goes, listen, do you know why we're talking? You know why I told you to stay after class? And I said, yeah, it's because I can't sit still. He goes, you're kind of on the list. Like, you tap a lot. You do it in my class. You do it in everybody else's class. He goes, Clint, though, here's the thing. I need you to know, so I watched you. And I sit back, and it's crazy. You'll work on an assignment. You start writing with your right hand, and then you tap with your left hand. And then in the middle of the assignment, you switch the pen. And then you'll start writing with your left hand, and you tap with your right hand. And he goes, I think you're ambidextrous. And I had no idea what that meant. And he goes, can you tap your head and then rub your belly at the same time? He's like, can you do that? And I was like, yeah, all day. And he's like, can you switch it? And I could go back and forth. I had this independence of my limbs. And he sat back and he goes, listen, kid, I don't think you're a problem. I just think you're a drummer. And some people are like, what's the difference between those two things? I don't think you're
that's pretty accurate.
Yeah. I just think you're a drummer. And again, going back to, like, you know, that single moment in time, and how moments change people's lives. In this moment, he leans back in his desk and he opened up his top drawer and he reached inside and he took out my very first pair of drumsticks, my very first pair. And he put them in my hands and he goes, take them. And he said, Clint, will you just keep them in your hands? Like, just try it out. Like, see what happens. And you guys, that was 25 years ago. And I can sit here on this podcast today and tell everyone that's listening, 25 years ago, literally to this exact day, even, I have tried my best to keep my promise to Mr. Jensen. And from that moment on, I've had the opportunity to tour and record all over the world as a professional drummer. I've been on America's Got Talent, played the drums with the Blue Man Group, Tim McGraw, Carrie Underwood. My whole college education was paid for from music scholarships. And I don't say all those things to go, oh, wow, good for you, Clint, or oh, what a list of accolades. No, I'm telling you that in hopes that somebody that's maybe listening to this episode realizes that there is value when you strive to see what's right. There is good that comes from striving to see opportunities instead of always the problems. And then when you create moments with people that allow them to see that and to live into that, when you can communicate the potential and the worth of an individual to the point that they see that within themselves, game over. Like that's how you create a culture that people never want to leave. You become Mr. Jensen.
Yes. It's such a great story. All right, and by the end of the podcast, we're going to teach John what a paradiddle and a flam tap are.
There we go. Let's do it.
But that aside, when I was reading it and just listening to it again, and like you talk about in your book, how we don't remember who won something last year or who was the Oscar went to. We all remember our mentors. And I'm sitting here thinking, Mr. Kirk, Mr. Adams, Coach Oberholzer, Coach Hill. Those four jump out at me in a big way for the same reasons. I was not a good student. I was not. But each of them tried to find something positive to aim at. And Mr. Adams really did. I mean, Barry and I are still friends to this day.
Yeah.
I mean, he was my social studies history teacher, and we're still friends to this day. Why? Because he believed in something that he saw in me that he pushed at.
Yeah.
I wrote a book back in 2007, and all my friends said, "Oh my gosh, you know how many English teachers are rolling over in their grave right now, going, oh my gosh, how did that happen?"
Yeah.
It happened. It just happens. You can relate to that big time. I mean, the accomplishments that you've made since then. It's a great topic. I even had it marked in the book where you give that story about, all the different Academy Award winners, best actors, who was had the highest profit margins. You don't remember any of that.
Yeah.
But you can rattle off the teachers.
Totally.
And you can rattle off the coaches, and you can rattle off the captains.
That's right.
That influenced you, just like you did with Mr. Jensen, just like I know John can. We all can. And we just have to take the time to acknowledge that they did it and look at why they did it and try and do that for someone else.
Totally.
One thing you talked about was finding solutions. Mr. Jensen found 2 solutions to a problem that everyone else identified as a problem. He identified the fact that you could be a drummer, and you did become that. And as I'm reading, you're describing how you're tapping your head and rubbing your belly. That's something I could never do. It was really frustrating to me. Still can't do it. That's why it was so hard for me to become a helicopter pilot, because you essentially have to do that, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
I struggled so much learning how to hover, and I described it as that, tapping your head and rubbing your belly is so hard for my brain to do that. But drummers and helicopter pilots, I feel like, have that innate ability naturally to do those 2 different things. Each limb is doing something different, just like when you're flying a helicopter.
Totally.
So Mr. Jensen found a helicopter pilot, and he found a drummer.
Yeah.
Pretty interesting when you look back at that.
How did hovering go for you, Clint? I'm curious. Did you pick up on it quickly, or did it take a long time? What was it like? Because hovering that's what it's all about. Let's face it. That is
totally
the thing. How did it go for you? I'm curious.
Thanks for joining us for this episode of the Hangar Z podcast. Don't forget to like and subscribe to hear more stories that promote the personnel and equipment behind the missions in public safety aviation. Lastly, stand by for a message after a word from our sponsors. Cheers.
Thank you to our sponsor, Precision Aviation Group. Mission-critical operators and fleet managers rely on Precision Aviation Group as a worldwide leading rotor and fixed-wing MRO provider. PAG provides tip-to-tail solutions in 4 MRO segments: avionics, components, engines, and manufacturing DER services. A single point of contact gives you access to over 150 million in inventory globally, 24/7. Just call 800-537-2778. Precision Aviation Group. Others sell parts. We sell support.
Thank you to our sponsor, Metro Aviation. Metro Aviation, the world's largest family-owned aeromedical operator, offers comprehensive aircraft services with 160-plus aircraft in over 25 states. The Completion Center installs medical and law enforcement kits and avionics, serving diverse aviation needs including offshore, utility, VIP, and corporate sectors.
Thank you to our sponsor, Robinson Helicopter Company, the choice for unrivaled safety and reliability, so you can accomplish any mission with confidence. For more than half a century, Robinson has been at the forefront of the helicopter industry. From the R-22 to the R-66 turbine, Robinson makes helicopters accessible so more people can accomplish more missions. Climb higher. For additional information, visit www.robinsonheli.com.
Thank you for tuning into this leadership series of the Hangar Z podcast, brought to you by Vertical Helicasting in partnership with Vertical Valor Magazine. We hope you enjoyed our conversation on effective leadership with Emmy Award winner Clint Pulver. His insights on the transformative power of mentorship and the importance of fostering genuine connections in the workplace are invaluable. especially in the realms of public safety and aviation. As Clint highlighted, it's crucial to recognize that employees often leave their bosses rather than their jobs, emphasizing the need for leaders who prioritize positivity, recognition, and personal connection. Investing in your team and cultivating a supportive culture can significantly enhance employee retention and engagement. Also, don't forget to read I Love It Here and check out Heli Life, their apparel brand that Clint proudly represents. Their commitment to designing high-quality gear for helicopter professionals is amazing. As a thank you for being part of our Hangar Z community, you can visit helilife.shop and use the promo code HangarZ, all one word, to receive 15% off your first order. Cheers.